son is racing.
Welcome, race fans, to another episode of the Rubbin' is Racing Daily Fantasy NASCAR Show. We've got all your action for the Overton's 400 from Long Pond, Pennsylvania. That's right, kids, we're battling this week at the Tricky Triangle, and this week we've had a ton of NASCAR craziness. First, we have Blaney will be in the third Penske car next year, so they're expanding from 2 cars to 3 cars. Menard will no longer be a part of RCR and will now drive the 21 for Wood Brothers next year. Kyle Larson, who is second in the Monster Energy Cup standings, lost his main target sponsor to soccer, of all things. And guess what? Bubba Wallace still doesn't have a ride.
Interesting fact about the last 10 races here at the Tricky Triangle is that Chevy has once again dominated with 7 wins, 6 in a row, 1 for Toyota and 2 for Ford, who has won the last 2 races with Chris Buescher's win last year and Blaney's win earlier this season in 2017, both for their first career wins. 7 of the past 10 winners started from the top 10. Will we get the first top Monster Cup winner this week? I think we do.
Wow, that would be crazy if we got yet another winner. I'm leaning a little different route, Liehr. But, guys, we have a 0% chance of rain. But it was 50% chance yesterday, so I would play the weather by ear, as the scheduled start time is 3 p.m. Eastern for this race at the Tricky Triangle. But, guys, we've got to talk about this. Qualifying takes place 3.5 hours before the race. And when you extract the time of qualifying, we're going to have less than 2 hours to get our lineup set for fantasy NASCAR purposes. And guess what, kids? This is the first of 3 weeks that we get to do this, thanks to NASCAR scheduling. Liehr, your thoughts on the interesting qualifying situation and how we have to pay attention Sunday mornings now?
Well, I think it's an interesting perspective from NASCAR. Obviously, it gives more excitement for the fans that are actually going to the race the day of. So it gives them a chance to kind of see the overall perspective of NASCAR and how the sport itself, incorporates the qualifying into it. But as far as from a fantasy perspective, I mean, man, this puts a lot of pressure on fantasy players out there to scramble. And if you are a multi, player as far as lineups are concerned, I mean, this is going to be a stressor because you have so many different tournaments and heads ups and everything that you are playing. It's going to make you scramble right before the deadline. So as far as from a fantasy owner's perspective, it's one of those things that it's mind-boggling, because we used to have so much time to get our lineups and put our thoughts together as to who we think is going to do what. And now literally you have to go off of, prior history and track data from each driver, but then you literally will only have a minutia of time to go into every single lineup and make those changes. So there's going to be a lot of scrambling this weekend. And from a DraftKings perspective, as far as a partnership from NASCAR and DraftKings, I think it hurts them a lot, because they're going to have a lot less people putting in lineups, just because the fact that they just don't have maybe that essential time right before the race to get going to actually put those lineups in. And I think it's going to leave a ton of overlay in most of these tournaments. And overall, it could hurt our fantasy sport as far as participation, because I think that a lot of people won't want to risk the money that they put into this, for such a small window of getting that perfect lineup set.
Yeah, and here's the thing, guys. I want to be perfectly clear about, Liehr and I are usually really good about trying to answer everything on YouTube and trying to keep a conversation going post-qualifying, and we're going to do our best this week as well. But here's the secret that nobody in the industry is talking about. I don't think that any of the pros out there and any of the people that do the shows, some of them aren't even close to being pros or top-ranked players, are going to sacrifice their ability to set lineups this week to put information out there. And so I think that a lot of people that bank on information from shows or personalities or professionals are not going to get that information this week, and it's going to cause a huge conundrum in fantasy NASCAR, especially on DraftKings this week.
Yeah, and especially too with the, I know we do our show usually a couple days before after qualifying takes place. And the last 2 weeks we've done it without any qualifying data. And, there are some of the guys out there that do the Sunday morning live shows and live streams. I mean, you really think that those guys are going to do that when they've got their own money and their own time on the line, that they've got to get their lineups in before the deadline? It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like I said, we're going to do our best to be as participatory as possible and give you our opinions. But I'm going to be completely honest. When it comes to answering a question from you guys or setting my lineup, I'm going to get my lineup set first. I love you guys to death, but we're all out to play fantasy, and I just want to be completely clear that that's my priority this week, and I don't want to give the illusion to people that that we're going to be easily available, because I don't think anyone in the industry is, the way this schedule is set up. But now that we've got that caveat out of the way and explained the craziness that's going to be this weekend, Liehr, it's time to burn some rubber, buddy. Do it to it.
Burning rubber, tricky triangle style. Hopefully no fog, baby.
Yes, hopefully we don't have any fog, as Chris Buescher's win just destroyed my money-making potential last year. All right, guys, so for the burning rubber this week, Liehr, let's let you go ahead and kick it off. I spend more money than you do. I'll let you have the honor.
Dude, I'm still relishing in the fact that I called that Chris. I didn't call Chris Buescher winning, but he was my value play that week, and it was awesome. But anyways, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit here and show you who I'm gonna use as my burning rubber this week. And I want to be going with the number 24 in Chase Elliott, Hendrick Motorsports, and he's had a fairly consistent 2017 season, with this being his second race at Pocono and the fourth in his whole Monster Cup career. He's had some pretty good success here at the Tricky Triangle. He's obviously coming off of a disappointing blown engine last week at Indy, which it burned a lot of fantasy owners. But also, that team, I know it's very disappointing for them to have to go through that. But, right now he's currently sitting 8th in the points, but he doesn't have a win. And so, without that win, that kind of makes him, on the bubble with only 6 races left in before the playoffs are determined. But, my choice is that he gets it done this week at the Tricky Triangle, because now, granted, qualifying, like we talked about, takes place just a few hours before the race. So this week it's going to be tough for fantasy owners, obviously, to lock those lineups in, knowing where their drivers are going to start at. But Chase has some great stats here. He started 8th, 13th, and 25th with finishes of 4th, 33rd, and 8th. And I just think that this team, obviously with Casey Kane's win, which I didn't call him to win, but he was my value guy last week. So I hope all you guys out there played him. I know some of you guys are cash game players, and obviously Kane's not even a thought in that kind of situation. But, but Elliott's stats, look a lot better without that 33rd, finish here, which was, last year's weather shortened race at Pennsylvania 400. But his cost this week is $9,500, which is a little high in my liking. But also in turn, that makes me like him a little bit more as well, if that makes any sense. Because I think other fantasy owners are going to take guys that are above him and also, take guys that are a little bit below him, because it's going to be hard to kind of work that $9,500 salary into your lineups this week. But the 24 team overall has had a lot of success at this track. And that includes, back in Jeff Gordon's days. But, it's time to start a new era here with the 24 and Elliott leading the way. And I just think he's got a great shot and a great chance this week to finally get that win, get him locked into those playoffs, and Hendrick Motorsports to continue the momentum that they've got going. And obviously Jimmy Johnson's going to be in it now. Casey Kane is locked into the playoffs. A lot of people are also too going to wonder about the number 88 team and getting him in the playoffs as well. And this is actually one of his better tracks too. But again, this is one of those types of tracks where we are going to be shifting. And he does have some pretty good stats here too. But again, I like Chase Elliott this week. I think that he's going to become a winner here this weekend. And I think the ownership of him is not going to be as high as maybe some people will think. And I think you're going to get some value out of him this week. So I'm definitely going to have some pretty good exposure on the number 24 on Chase Elliott.
All right, dude. I like where your head's at. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
All right. How many races of this season has Chase Elliott been required to be in the winning lineup? Out of all the races this year, what, one maybe? I don't even think it's one. I think it's zero.
I think he's definitely been one of the, but that always boils down to as well where he qualifies at.
Right.
But with that equipment that he has, and he's right there with Kyle Larson and all these guys. And Ryan Blaney, he's on the cusp. And I think with Blaney's win earlier this year, this is just one of those types of tracks where obviously strategy is going to come into play, but that team is just right there on the cusp of getting that win. And they've had some issues, obviously, but every team does, and I think they're going to rise above that this weekend and go to victory lane.
Yeah, no, I get the argument. The reason why I pointed that out is at the $9,500 price tag, I'm just worried that his ownership percentage is going to be significantly higher than what it should be, right? And the reason I say this is a guy that has been required to be on the winning lineup a total of 0 times this season should not be 9,500 and should not be the 18 to 24% owned that he probably will be this week. And it's too high of a salary, too high of ownership percentage in the projected ownership that I see. Plus, just not being on winning lineups and not being required because of what you said, his overqualification. I think I'm just going to fade Elliott unless we get a qualification mess up. If for some reason he's way down the list, I will probably have him and have him a lot. But until then, I'd rather spend my money up, like you said, which maybe you're right. Maybe it drives down ownership percentage, but I'd rather spend up. And I realize he's not in this car, but I don't have any Mobil 1 stuff. I'm going with Kevin Harvick at 10,200. And before I get into Kevin Harvick, guys, let's be clear. When we talk burning rubber, Truex, Rowdy, and Larson are clearly the favorites and the dominators of NASCAR. We don't want to sound like broken records and talk about them every week. So those guys are always in play. But a guy that I think a lot of people are going to overlook is Kevin Harvick. And that's why I'm on him. He has 3 second places in his last 6 races here. 5 top 10s, and if you wipe out the blown engine he had, he has all amazing finishes, 1 9th, a 4th, and all seconds. It's just unreal how good he's been here as of late. Now, I realize he doesn't have a win here, but anybody that dominates a track like he has in recent history is clearly due for a win, and I think that this week may be the week that Harvick gets that team where they get the pits set up right, and he actually gets to go out and compete for the win. Now, he may just be a second-place car again, but traditionally that pays off for rostering Harvick here at the Tricky Triangle. Your thoughts on Harvick, buddy?
Yeah, first, how disappointing. I had some exposure on him last week, and I thought and by the way, real quick side note, but how about all the carnage last week at Indy? I was not expecting anything like that whatsoever. No. And I know a lot of people didn't like it because they just because of the delays and the red flags and everything else. But I definitely found it interesting because, you didn't know what was going to happen. These guys were wrecking before even they the start finish line. It was just that crazy there. And, I was disappointed in Harvick because he was still part of all of that and not getting caught up in any of the wrecks. But yet his car still didn't perform as what that team should have at that racetrack. So, but, like you said here, we're at a different racetrack at Pocono, but within his last, 6 races here, he's finished second, 42nd, 9th, 4th, and 2nd. So a lot of seconds in there and, top 5s, but in 2015 in this race. But, I think depending on where he qualifies at, he's definitely going to be a play. I mean, you got to have exposure on Kevin Harvick. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, he's definitely going to be a player to get his second win of the season. But as far as from a fantasy perspective, at that price point, I believe he's 10,200. But you definitely have to have some exposure on him. But I am going to be cautious about my exposure because last week kind of threw up a little bit of a flag personally for me, just because with the type of drivers that were left. Now, obviously, Keselowski is a different type of driver, but he just didn't come with it last week, and that's kind of disappointing. So I don't know if they're kind of resting on their laurels because they already know that they're in the playoffs or what, but that's going to halter me a little bit on my exposure to Harvick, just because I think you've got other teams out there that are going to be hungry, that are going to be more aggressive because they know that there's only 6 races left to get into those playoffs. And like we've talked about earlier in the show, we've got a lot of changes that are going to take place, going into the 2018 season. We've already had a ton, but don't get me wrong, folks, there is going to be a lot more changes that will take place before the 2017 season is over. So, but as far as from Harvick, from a fantasy perspective, I will have ownership on him, but I'm not going to be like all over him everywhere.
What I can't figure out, Lear, and I love you to death, I can't figure out how you're justifying Chase Elliott, who's had all these equipment problems, a blown engine, and trying to tamper yourself back on Harvick. That I can't understand, but
because it's the Sunny D gut rot, man, telling me what's going to happen. No, I'm just, it's one of those things where I just get gut feelings about things, and just based off of what's trending in NASCAR, and then also, their history. And it's one of those things where I think that Chase Elliott definitely is going to be a lot more hungrier to get the win and get up towards the front more than Kevin Harvick, because let's be honest, Kevin Harvick has no need to, besides fiduciary reasons to get the win. But other than that, I mean, they've already locked themselves in the playoffs. I just think teams that are not locked in are just going to be a lot more hungry and be a lot more aggressive when it comes to strategies, because that's obviously going to play a factor into this weekend as well.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's so hard because you and I and everybody else out there, when watching this show, we have no clue who's starting what or where until 2 hours before the race takes place. So basically all we have to go on is track history and trends right now within the sport.
Right. No, I feel you. So since we're without A-Dub yet again this week, let's give everybody, we got called out for not doing the bonus picks. Now, we're doing the spot of the moment, so we don't have all the stats to back it up. But I'm going to ask Lear to channel his inner Rain Man above and beyond Chase Elliott. If you had to pick one other guy to burn some rubber and don't do the Truex, Rowdy, or Larson, who would it be this week, buddy?
Honestly, I really think that, and we talked about guys that are locked in. Hamlin is one of those guys where he was going for it, and he won obviously 2 weeks ago, and he's locked into the playoffs. But I definitely think it's either going to be, I'm sticking with JGR on this, but I'm definitely going to go with Matt Kenseth. I know I talked about him last week, but Kenseth is also, again, he is at that point where he's still looking for a ride. I mean, we've had a lot of changes, and yet we have not heard Matt Kenseth's name solidified into a seat next season. So he still obviously knows that the pressure is on him to perform and get that victory. He did have some pretty good fantasy points last week as well. And that's another guy that I'm so disappointed that after everybody wrecked out in the corners last week, that he wasn't good enough to step up to the plate and go up there and take the win. But I think this week, especially too, I think we're already filming after practice one. He was the fastest in practice one. But obviously that's different from qualifying trim to race trim. So, but I would, if I had to pick one, I would say Matt Kenseth, or let's throw in Joey Logano as well, because Logano, he's got that win, but it doesn't count towards the playoffs because, it was disqualified for the changes that, after inspection, after the race completed. So that's another guy that still needs to get a victory to lock himself into the playoffs as well. So I would look for Kenseth and Logano, depending on where they qualify, to be my other burning rubber guys. But I'm definitely, I know we said that we're not going to talk about them, but I think Larson, dude, is going to have another fantastic race this weekend because of the whole sponsorship issue. He's got a new sponsor on the car this week with Energizer. They're not new. They've been on the car before, but it's not the traditional Target vehicle that we've been seeing week in and week out. So that's a team that's going to be looking for sponsorship, and I don't think it's going to be hard for them to find it because obviously you're talking about one of the guys this season, top two in the entire sport, and I think that they'll definitely get sponsorship, but that's a guy that I think wants to come out, especially after last week and what he's done so far in the 2017 season, and come out and have a great race here because this racetrack is one that suits well for him. Now, obviously, it's the tricky triangle, but I think more of the flat track guys are going to have success here, obviously.
Wow, Liehr, I asked for one and you give me like five. And take three of the guys I was going to talk about. So, on that note, I'm going to reach down, kids. I'm going to tell you, since we haven't had qualifying, and he always overqualifies, so I can never talk about him. We're going to go back, and I'm going to tell you, Jamie McMurray is a guy that I love to burn some rubber this week. Look, I think he's going to be significantly under-owned. The problem is the guy always overqualifies. If you can get him, if Jamie Mack can qualify outside that top 10, gobble him up this week. Like, Chip Got Nasty Racing is just fast, and we've seen him have a solid year. He's hanging around. He hasn't got a win yet, but you know what? Pocono, anything's possible with pit strategies, and I just like this hat, and I never get to wear it.
Well, the other thing, too, man, is he's down in salary this week from $8,700 down to $8,100, so I mean, still, it's above that 8,000 mark, but a lot less cheaper than last week.
Well, that is, in my opinion, that is one of the best cars you're getting for that price tag. Like, so as long as he doesn't overqualify, you should be good. But the story with Jamie Mack is the guy always overqualifies. So I figured I'd
real quick, too, before you move on.
Okay.
And we didn't really talk about it that much as far as pricing, but also, too, you've got Keselowski at 9,100 this week, and Logano, the Penske boys. Logano's at 8,800 with Ryan Blaney at 8,700. So if you wanted to do a Penske stack as kind of a separator for yourself, I think that's a great choice because those three guys under the $9,200 price point is huge.
I agree. There's some egregious mispricing this week. And one of those is, I'm going to go ahead and steal the value play since you talked forever there for a while. No, but great info. One of the value plays that's just completely mispriced this week is AJ Allmendinger. And it's a guy that we love to be on, especially when we get to courses like the Tricky Triangle that function. Yes, it's a super speedway, but with the 3 different turns, it functions a lot like a road course in the turns. His last 4 fantasy point totals are 63, 26, 33, and 56. He carries with him a $6,100 price tag, and 3 of those point totals will pay off for you and probably help you win a lineup. 2 of them for sure will, in the 63 and 56. I just love me some Dinger this week. Allmendinger's going to get it done as long as he doesn't overqualify. Liehr, you like you some Dinger?
I mean, I don't know how you could not at being $6,100 between Chris Buescher and Aric Almirola. And that team's just been, it's crazy how much more consistent the JTG team has been this season. But yeah, I definitely like Allmendinger this week, especially at that price point at the $6,100. Now, he's got some great experience here. He's raced here 19 times. He's got 2 top 10s. But most of the times when he's started later in the race, so, in the 20s and 30s, he's finished in the teens. So even 4 races ago, he started 22nd, finished 7th, started 32nd, finished 16th, started 13th, finished 14th, started 21st, finished 22nd. So he'll either move up a lot or kind of stick around right where he starts from. But at $6,100, you're not going to get much more of a value than that. Somebody that can obviously move up or stay where he's at. So even if he gets a higher qualifying position, let's say 10 to 15. Obviously, I don't think he's going to qualify in the top 10, but even at that point, at $6,100 and he stays where he's at, that's value, brother. Like you got to be on that all day, every day.
Well, if he qualifies top 10, I will own 0 of him because there's 0% chance that he holds that position. But I think anywhere 20th or later, you're golden on that. Even maybe like high teens, you might be all right. Liehr, before I give my second value pick, who do you have for value this week, buddy?
I'm going to be sticking in the JGR family here.
Hold on, man. Before you do this, I just have to point out, I'm usually the JGR homer. And so far, all you've done is talk JGR today on the show. Like, I'm just saying.
Don't forget about my Hendrick Chase Elliott pick.
Well, but like all I'm hearing is JGR is awesome. Like, you know me and my JGR blinders. Go ahead.
Well, and finally, they're off the Schneid, too. So, side note, really, too, real quick. Excuse me, JGR. How about the issues last week from the 18 and the 78 team with Adam Stevens getting it into a verbal confrontation with, some of the Furniture Row guys, and then with the coach coming in and throwing the gauntlet down on the Furniture Row guys and nothing for Adam Stevens. So I don't know. It's you can take either side of it or be in the middle, but I think it's a little bit much that the coach has that ability to basically render whoever he wants to and basically suspend them, even though it's not exactly his team. And I think it's one of those things where he's playing favorites, and that's not right. Obviously there were 2 guys, 3 guys technically, 2 from Furniture Row, and then Adam Stevens from, Kyle Busch's team, but getting in the verbal disagreement there. But it's not like it was one of those things where, fisticuffs and everything came to it. The guy was just telling him, Stevens, get out of his box. And, it's not like Stevens was backing down either, No. He was being pretty bold for a guy that was a lot larger than he was. But I just think it's crazy that coach can actually go in there and say, okay, well, we're going to suspend you guys for somebody that's I know it's an affiliate, but and I understand too that technically they are JGR employees, so which is a head scratcher for me as well. But what are your thoughts on that, man?
No, dude, Furniture Row leases the crew from Joe Gibbs. And apparently, when your name's on all the cars and you write the checks for the pit crews, you can suspend people when they pick fights with Rowdy's team. I don't know, man. It looked like both teams were at fault. Yes, Rowdy was racing Truex hard, but Truex got on the apron and lost control and spun into Rowdy. I didn't see anything wrong. I think that's the kind of stuff that makes NASCAR better and more entertaining, right? Especially in a race where there's 19 friggin' wrecks, right? Like, it was absurd. That was one of the few light spots of entertainment. I don't know. But get back to your pick, dude.
Okay. So, obviously, the number 19 team with Suarez is quietly having a fantastic rookie season. He also seems to get overlooked every single week in fantasy. He's got pretty much a low ownership percentage, but he's been performing week in and week out. As the great Mel Kiper would say, he's flying under the radar this season. In his last four races, he scored 46, 48, 18, and 35 fantasy points. And the larger points came when he started from the teens, so from 10 to 20. Suarez finished right where he started in the race here a handful of weeks back at the Tricky Triangle. But even then, in his Xfinity starts here, he's only got 2 races under his belt in Xfinity at the Tricky Triangle, where he started 3rd and finished 9th, and then started 7th and finished 5th. And now, he'll not be a lap leader or anything tomorrow's race, or even near a dominator. But if he starts in the teens or even in the 20s, I mean, you guys got to get all over that play, because he's definitely at a bargain price. He's going to be a great place differential guy at $7,200. And obviously, let's see what happens here. I think happy hour's going on right now while we film, but let's see what happens here in happy hour and where his times are, where he's going to be at. and especially where he qualifies at tomorrow. But obviously, like we talked about, we'll do our best to update people as best as possible. But, you know, we're going to be scrambling to get our own lineups completed before the deadline as well. So, but I think Suarez is a fantastic play, you know, if he starts within the teens, and it's a no-brainer if he starts within the 20s. The kid's just been real consistent this season. And so far, I'll be honest with you, I think he is my rookie of the year so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's either him or Eric Jones, and it'll be the one that ends up getting a win if either one of them do get a win in the next few weeks. I love the Suarez play, and you are absolutely right. For some reason, no one shows the kid respect when he's starting in that equipment, starting in the teens and 20s, and his ownership is just fantastically low. I just like the play, and you know how much I like the JGR equipment. Somebody else I'm on for value is another egregiously underpriced guy, and that is Almirola at $6,000. I thought somebody wrecked on track here at Pocono. That's why I was glancing over the side. Since Almirola has returned from his injury, he had an 18-point performance, but then he bounced back last week with a 47-point performance. This is traditionally a car that likes to qualify low and gives us a whole room of place differential. I like Almirola running it back this week off that 47-point fantasy performance. I mean, dude, $6K for that kind of car and that quality of driver is just too cheap in my opinion, especially when you're considering the other options around him. Dinger and Almirola just stand out hands down above the rest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely like Almirola as well. Even though his stats are kind of wishy-washy here at the Tricky Triangle, he's got 10 starts. He's got an average starting position of 20.3 and an average finish of 26.4. But it's one of those things where, me personally, I think Almirola, I don't know what his contract situation is with Richard Petty, but you know, you've got that Bubba Wallace kind of sitting in the wings. He's been in the car a couple of times while you were out and performed very well. So I think the pressure's on Aric to, you know, show what he's got and get in there. And it really stinks because obviously those chances had to come from an injury taking place, which we saw live at Kansas Speedway. Mm-hmm. But that's not only just in this sport, but, you know, even in football. Like, for example, you know, we're from Kansas City. You know, when Alex Smith was out in San Francisco and Alex Smith got hurt and Colin Kaepernick came in and just blew the doors off, well, Alex Smith never got his chance again. And obviously, contractually, they have a contract with Aric Almirola, but they know what Bubba Wallace can do in this car. And it's time for Aric Almirola to step up to the plate and prove that, you know, he's not just a average type of driver, that he needs to step up his game and make sure that he can solidify and stay in that ride, because we all know how competitive it is within the sport of NASCAR between sponsors and, you know, getting good drivers and equipment. So he definitely needs to come and bring it this weekend and for the rest of the season in that number 43 car. But I definitely, at that price point for $6,000, he's definitely going to be in some of my lineups for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard, but the rumor is that Richard Petty Motorsports is trying to go to 2 cars next year, and they will try to have Bubba Wallace as their second driver. That's the rumor that they've been floating out. They're trying to find sponsorship and financing to make it happen, and if so, it will be awesome. Well, kids, that wraps up the value segment, and with no qualifying, we're probably not going to send anybody to the garage again this week. Although Liehr and I kind of want to send NASCAR. You know what? Forget it. We're going to send NASCAR to the garage this week for putting qualifying and the race on the same day and only giving us, when qualifying is all said and done, maybe an hour and a half to get our lineup set. So NASCAR, you're going to the garage, but I get it. I understand. I'm not really that upset. We had a lot of positive feedback on the strategy session, though, and I think we're going to go that route. So, Liehr, I'm going to put you on the spot, buddy. With it being the Tricky Triangle, the Rain Man predicted Buescher as the value play last year and stumbled into a win based on a Scooby-Doo bank of fog. What are you looking strategy-wise to make as a play this weekend at the Tricky Triangle?
Well, obviously, man, I think it's very comparison to last week when we're talking laps, because we're talking about another track that is a larger track with less laps to do and more place differential as part of your fantasy lineups again. So basically it's going to be the same type of strategy last week. But of course, we cannot predict, 19 wrecks or, anything that takes place as far as that perspective. And I don't think we're going to have that this weekend, just because of the way that this track is. It's nothing compared to Indy last week and all the carnage that happened there. So I don't think we're even going to have half of that this weekend. So it's going to be a little bit more predictable, because last week, I think the top fantasy lineup in the qualifier was 270 points, and it still had Kyle Busch on it. Because you have to, if you are a multi-lineup player, you have to make a couple lineups where you just have to set lineups for that carnage to take place, for that just in case. So it's almost like racing it like a super speedway, like Daytona or Talladega last weekend. But I wasn't anticipating that whatsoever. But for this week at the Tricky Triangle, it's kind of going to be the same thing, to where the stats that I said earlier in the intro, 7 out of the last 10 winners have come from the top 10. So you're obviously going to, guys that start up front, stay up front. So, probably the guy that's on the pole, or if you believe that the person starting, next to the pole winner, you're probably going to go with one of those two guys, which is probably going to either be Kyle Busch or Martin Truex Jr. Or maybe Kyle Larson. Who knows? Maybe he finally gets back up to the front instead of starting from the complete rear again this week. But, I think it's one of those where you have to pick at least 2 from the top 10. And then you're going to have to choose 1 or 2 guys from the teams, Suarez. And then, a couple sprinkles, maybe 1 sprinkle from the 20s. And then you got to have a huge place differential guy, again, a lower salary guy, to get some of those higher end guys. I've put some lineups together and kind of tinkled around with how to get things this week. And
did you tinkle or did you tinker?
It definitely, you get the ability to, you don't really have to dip down and do a super, super pump play like the Jeffrey Earnhardt's or the Josh Weiss's or any of that this week. You can literally put 2 or 3 top end guys, like I'm talking about Kevin Harvick, Truex, Kyle Busch, any of those top end guys.
Harvick, Larson.
Yeah, Harvick, Larson, Jimmy Johnson, any of those type of guys. And then also sprinkle in some of the middle tier guys like the Eric Joneses and the Suarezes and the AJ Allmendingers of the world, and Aric Almirola's, and even, Newman's and Austin Dillon and Ty Dillon. You can fit all those guys in there. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on this week, is definitely starting with, and with 160 laps, more than likely we're going to get somebody that we're going to at least get 2 dominators, especially with the segments being implemented there. And it could even be spread out to even more, like 3 dominators. So, you're going to have to pick and choose your battles this weekend, which is every single weekend, but I'm definitely going to go with 2 top 10 guys, 1 or 2 in the teens, 1 or 2 in the 20s, and then maybe 1 from the 30s or below. But I'm probably going to focus more on 2 in the top 10, and then maybe 2 to 3 in the teens, because of the way that everything plays out this weekend.
No, I think you said that pretty well. It's place differential, place differential, place differential for me.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other comments we got last week that I would like to hit on a little bit is somebody asked what kind of contest we play and would like that information. Liehr and I are pretty much GPP players. Liehr occasionally throws some cash lineups in. Primarily, all I've been playing, because I've not been a fan of the current prize structure or the payouts or the field sizes. I've been playing the qualifiers, and I'm basically going for all or nothing, going for broke on the qualifiers right now. Just seems like that is it's weird, but it seems like that is the best bang for my buck right now in fantasy NASCAR until we get some restructuring with these tournaments. But Liehr, do you have anything to add to that? I think your strategy is just spot on right this week. You're going to want 1 dominator, probably another car in the top 10, top 12. Hopefully, for my purposes, that'll be Harvick, who likes to qualify right around the 10 to 12 mark, right? And I'll probably partner him up with a Rowdy or Truex or Larson, whoever's sitting on the pole. Somewhere in there, get those middle guys and throw in some value once we see the end of qualifying and the end of practice. So, you're just going to have to what I would recommend kids this week is have a strategy and a race vision laid out well before you get into qualifying. right? Like, understand what you're wanting to do or how you're seeing the race, and then take what happens in qualifying and just insert it into your theory, right?
Yeah.
If you try to develop your theory after you get those qualifying results, I don't think you're going to have enough time to set lineups this week.
Well, definitely, especially if you're doing multiple lineups in DraftKings, and then if you're playing on Yahoo or Fantasy Live on NASCAR.com. I mean, and also one of our other buddies that watches this show every week, Aric, sportsfantasyleagues.com. He's got a great website. Little plug for you there, Aric, for his website for NASCAR as well. But basically, if you have all these different lineups and everything that you are trying to set for within that 2-hour time period, it's going to be absolutely tough. And it's going to be one of those things this week is kind of a test to see how it works out. But as far as when you're looking at DraftKings, like the Mega Beast is $8 to enter that, and the max is 47,700 players. Right now, we're sitting at 7,000 players with basically 24 hours left until it starts. Usually, that thing books up. I think it's not even going to be maybe 3/4 full this week, just because of the way it's going to play out.
Right.
And I'm assuming that DraftKings is probably going to have a little bit of a meeting with NASCAR and the guys there, and lay it out, saying, "Hey, look, this is what we've got. I know you guys want to grow your brand and grow your sport and do it for the fans. You want to get more people in the seats, but I'm sure that DraftKings probably pays a healthy amount to NASCAR itself too, to be the strict daily fantasy provider to them. So that they're probably going to have a little bit of say in this, because this is going to overall hurt their business. But when it comes to tournaments, yeah, I definitely sprinkle the Mega Beast. I mean, why not? Also the qualifiers every single week until something happens there. But then from there, it's pretty pick and choose. We used to play the lug nut a lot, but the money's gone down on that. I always play the donut, the $2 donut.
I used to play the victory lane every week, and they've messed up the money on that. I threw at least 10 lineups in that thing every week.
Yeah.
And now it's not the tournament it once was.
In the other one, which is the $4 Chrome Horn 2020 Max, which that's a nice tournament too, because you've got 20 max entries that you can do. So that basically evens the playing field with the pros versus the Joes. So everybody can only do so many lineups in a 23,000 field tournament. So,
my problem there is payout structure. That's the reason why I don't like that tournament. Is if I beat 24,000 people, I should win more than like a couple of grand.
Yeah, it's $4,000 to the winner.
Yeah.
So basically, $4 entry for $4,000 payout.
Yeah, it's one of the better tournaments, but it's still there's still some just problems across the board in the way the running tournaments. And as far as the NASCAR and the timing thing with DraftKings, I think NASCAR just needs to understand that fantasy has literally grown every other sport on the planet, right? Every other sport has utilized fantasy to grow their sport, and NASCAR needs to do the same thing, and this, I think, will do the opposite. So hopefully we'll get that all straightened out in the next couple of weeks. But guys, it's time to do our lineup. Now remember, this lineup is not for you to copy. It's us putting together a lineup. It may be the right process. It's going to be the right process. It may be the right lineup, or it could be a dumpster fire, depending on how much Liehr and I step on each other's toes while we're trying to put this thing together.
Well, again, little prequel here. As Poppa said last week, don't hold us to this lineup because we reserve the right to change it after qualifying takes place.
Right. Yeah. All right, man. So with no qualifying, where are we going to go? You know what? Let's just have fun. Let's throw both of our burning rubber picks in here. That way we're not getting any argument, and then we'll decide a lineup from there. How about that?
Sounds good, man.
All right. So we're going to throw Harvick and Chase on this team. Liehr, where do we want to go from there?
Honestly, in my personal situation, I always start my lineups just to kind of let you guys know how I do it, but always do my big boys up top first, then see, exactly what I've got going to where I can put in the guys that I like down farther from the bottom that I like. So then that way, at the end, I know what I can spend and what I can get. So I'm gonna dip down, and I really like him, and I really believe in him, man. But I'm gonna go with number 19 and Suarez.
Really?
Yeah,
I like that play. Dude, you know what I was going to do before you went down to Suarez? I'm going to spend more money, and I'm going to force us to value buy, because I just really I was going to do the Kenseth thing. That's what was so funny. You started off on Hamlin. You're like, Hamlin was good, and then you went into the I love Kenseth this week. I don't know what it is. I just have this gut feeling that Kenseth is going to get his win as well before Rowdy does, and just cause a conundrum in the NASCAR community. So I want to roster Kenseth. That leaves us 6,950 per driver remaining. 2 left. Where do you want to go, Liehr?
Well, how about this? Since you got to choose your Kenseth play, I'm assuming you may want to roll either your Allmendinger or Almirola play.
Yeah. Which one? Do you need the extra 100? I'll go ahead and do that and let you have the last pick.
If you throw in Allmendinger, then that leaves me $7,800 on the board to pick a driver. But even then, I'm still not going to get really the driver that I want to put on the team.
Tragic.
Yeah.
I see where you want more money is what you're wanting.
Yeah. If I have to pick a driver, okay, and you're leaving it up to me since it's my pick.
All right.
I may pigeonhole you here.
All right. What are you gonna do to me?
I'm gonna go a little bit above what we've got left over. But dude, I think Logano. I like Logano.
A little bit above. All right, that's quite a bit above.
That leaves you nothing, like 5,100. So, but if you don't want to do that, I completely understand. No worries.
Dude, I don't have a problem with it. I don't know that this lineup will remain anywhere part of
close to where,
right.
Exactly.
But dude, if I'm left with 5,100, I'm plug and playing David Reagan and not thinking twice about it. The only other option for me would be to reach down at Colwitt, but that team has had problems as of late. I really liked what Colwitt was doing for us fantasy-wise, but they've had engine problems, brake problems. They've had all kinds of stuff. And this is not a kind of track where you want engine or brake problems. So I would defer and go with Reagan, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, overall, for a team of that tier, they've been pretty consistent, week to week. Now, last week, unfortunately, he went out fairly early. No, I always like Reagan. He's a pretty consistent driver.
Yeah,
with not the equipment that all the other guys have. So
I actually like that lineup for pre-qualifying, and that's Harvick, Elliott, Suarez, Kenseth, Logano, Reagan. Remember, guys, the purpose of us
spending all the salary.
Right, spending all of it. Remember, guys, which usually means you're not as unique as you would like to be.
Right.
Remember, guys, the purpose of us putting together a lineup is not to give you a lineup to enter or a cheat code. We don't sell lineups. We're trying to teach people how to be better fantasy players and how to understand the proper way to set up a NASCAR lineup. And hopefully we did that this week, and hopefully that's not a dumpster fire of a lineup. But regardless, you know what? It's only $8. I will have that, even if qualifying totally upends it. I will enter that in the big boy, and you can compete against it there. So with that said, it wraps up another Rubbin' His Racing show.
Well, as always, guys, definitely appreciate you watching every week. The views keep getting bigger and bigger, and we definitely appreciate that. And you guys spreading the love for the show. We do it for the love of NASCAR that we have for the sport, but also for the love of fantasy. Definitely appreciate you guys spreading the word for it. Still looking for sponsorship if you guys know of anybody that'd like to sponsor the show. But because, like I said, our show keeps getting bigger and bigger from week to week. But if you guys have any questions, obviously hit us up on the YouTube page. We will do our best to comment, but don't expect us to each individualize a comment. It may just be a comment for everybody, just because of the time frame that we have for every single person and what we've got there with qualifying. So, but we'll see how all this plays out. And again, I think this week is going to be an interesting week from fantasy perspective, because I think a lot of people are haltering their entries just because of the qualifying issue. So there will be some overlay big time out there. So if you got some money in the old bank account and want to take a stab and take a risk, and you enjoy the sweat like me and the big Poppa do, this week's a good week.
Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in and being a part of the show as always. We have real likes, real views, and a real fan base, and that's because of you guys. And we want to thank you for supporting us. And like I said, our goal is we will do our best to get you out any information and answer any questions. But like I said, I'm a fantasy player first and foremost, and my lineups take priority. But I will try my best to get you guys answers to any questions you might have. So let's work together. Let's try to get this done, and let's win some money this week. Thanks for tuning in.
Have a great weekend, everybody.